Hello everyone! I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today we are going to talk about my synesthesia. As many of y'all know, I mention that I have synesthesia a lot. In a lot of my videos, in my live streams, in interviews, anytime that I'm vending at conventions and people ask me about my synesthesia poetry books, it comes up a lot. And this video, we're going to really deep dive into what synesthesia is, what kind of synesthesia I have, and how exactly that impacts my writing and my art. So first things first, for those of y'all who are like, what is synesthesia? Synesthesia is a phenomenon that happens where essentially two different parts of your brain, the wires are crossed, is the simplified explanation for it. If y'all want a more detailed explanation, I'm going to put a link in the description below to a more scientific article on what exactly synesthesia is. But that's the gist of it, is it's basically two different parts of your brain, the wires are crossed. The most common form of synesthesia is people seeing colors. People will associate certain music with certain colors. It's not like hallucinating. Just for starters, it's not the same thing as hallucinating. It's this phenomenon in your brain, so it's, you're not physically seeing colors floating around like you're hallucinating. It's all in your head. It's not out here where you can physically see, sort of thing. But let's say you're listening to a song and in your head you're like, oh, this is more of like a blue, and then oh, this one's more of like a red, and they see these these amorphous colors changing and blending and things like that. There's also where people associate different things with colors, such as numbers or days of the week or certain words or even certain letters of the alphabet. Some people will be like, oh, Friday is orange, or oh, the number 3 is green. And they really don't have an explanation beyond, well, it just is. For whatever reason, their brain has kind of crossed these two different things, and it has assigned that it's like, yeah, Fridays are orange. Yeah, the number 3 is green. It just is. There isn't really any reasoning beyond that. It's not like they were inspired and decided that the number 3 was green because they grew up in a beautiful farmland full of green, or oh, Friday is orange because growing up they always played basketball on Fridays. No, it's just their brain has just for some reason decided that Friday is orange, the same way your brain has decided that the sky is blue. It's the same thing. It's a very odd phenomenon. And I have met other people who also have synesthesia, and it's very unusual for me to meet people that have a synesthesia that's different than this associating colors with other things sort of synesthesia. That seems to be the most common one. Every once in a while, I will encounter people who associate certain things with smells. So maybe a type of word smells a certain way to them, or a certain color smells a certain way to them, or even touch, that a certain color feels a certain way, or a certain word feels a certain way. Like, oh, color purple feels like velvet, sort of thing. And as a synesthesia person, it's very difficult to really describe what that feels like. What it feels like that in your world, the color purple feels like velvet. That in your world, the number 3 is green. It's something that's very difficult for people to wrap their brains around who literally don't live in the same world as you, who are not a synesthesia person. I mean, it would be kind of like the fact that we only have red, blue, and yellow cones to be able to see those colors with our eyes. If there's a person who had another color that they could see, they can see a whole other color spectrum that we can't see. It's the same thing as that. It's just an experience that if you're not a synesthesia person, it's something you're just really not going to completely understand, because you can't. It's physically impossible. But I personally, because I'm a writer, try to do my best to make it make as much sense as I possibly can, because it is a pretty nonsensical thing when we really break it down. But it is a very cool phenomenon, I do gotta say. And from what I understand, with other people's synesthesia, for the most part, it doesn't really have very many negative effects. One of the only negative effects I've ever heard of from other people is that it can be distracting. Especially if you're one of those people where if like you listen to music and it makes you see colors, like I can see how that's very distracting. So like I'm sure when those kind of people are driving in the car, they can't really listen to music because they'd just be seeing like a rave while they drive. That wouldn't be very safe. But other than something like that, it's really not something that has a lot of drawbacks. Like it's not like you're at a higher risk for having a stroke. It's not like you have brain damage. It's not like you have some other underlying thing wrong with you. It's not like how sometimes people will have mental phenomenon because of a brain tumor pressing on a certain part of their brain. Like it's not caused by any of that. It's literally like a hardwired thing in our brain. It's not caused by some sort of outside influence. What is my synesthesia? From my personal experience with the different people that I have talked to and people who have talked to me who know other people who have synesthesia, I still have yet to meet anyone that has the same synesthesia that I do, as well as I have yet to meet somebody that has synesthesia on the extreme level that I do. And the reason why this is extreme is that I have more than one. I have 3 different forms of synesthesia, and they're all interlaced. So that's part of what makes it so intense, is that I have 3 different parts of my brain that are all interacting in kind of wonky ways that create this weird world that I live in. So number 1, I taste colors. Yes, literally. The color red tastes like things to me. The color periwinkle tastes like things to me. Like literally, if I see a particular color, it has a taste. And a lot of times people will ask me, well, what does this color taste like? Well, what does that color taste like? Unless it's one of my short list, like, favorite colors, I don't know. I have to physically be looking at the color in order to be able to tell you what that color tastes like. So for instance, my favorites are shades of red. Different shades of red taste like the best things. So, like, for instance, scarlet tastes like raspberries. I don't know. It just does. And, like, crayon red, oh man. Oh man, that tastes like maraschino cherries. Just so sweet and sugary, and bleh, I'm, like, drilling in my mouth just thinking about it. And a really weird one, purple, like the Purple Mountains Majesty color. Oh, just, sorry. That one tastes like, and it took me a while to figure out what exactly that taste was, because I could taste it, but I was like, I don't know what this is. And it took me a while to figure it out, but it's that, like, old-timey blackberry ice cream or like blackberry yogurt sort of taste. And it's the kind where it's not like the real fruit, it's like the artificial flavoring, like super chemical-y one. Oh man, it tastes like that, and it's so good. And I have moments like that, especially on my live stream when I'm doing live art where I'm actually drawing for y'all. I'll have what I call my synesthesia moments, where some color that I'm using in the drawing at that time, I'll actually tell y'all what it tastes like. And I've tasted colors that taste like Jolly Ranchers. I've had colors that taste like loaves of bread. I've had colors that taste like crunchy toast. There's a wide spectrum. All sorts of things that taste like all sorts of things. And people have asked me, well, are there any colors that taste bad? And yes, there are, but thankfully they're very few and far between, so I don't experience it very often. One of the worst colors that I really hate, thinking about it, y'all, is this very ugly, icky, like, gray color. It's almost like a, like, brownish gray color. It's just, oh, it's awful. Oh, it's just making me thinking about it, but it's literally like that feeling of if you bite a metal spoon. Oh, I hate it. Hate it so much. Ugh. Yeah, so that's one of the bad ones. And I mean, that's really the only negative impacts to my daily life that I have is every once in a while. Like, it's once in a real great blue moon, y'all, that I'll see one of those colors. And it's just kind of like, blah, it's just having a really gross taste in your mouth for a minute. And unless there's some reason where I have to stare at that color indefinitely or something, I can just not look at it. It's that simple. I just don't have to look at it anymore and I stop having that experience. So it's really not, there really aren't very many drawbacks for me having synesthesia, having my version of synesthesia, but the positives are absolutely enormous, y'all. How does tasting colors affect my creative works? Well, because there's a lot of really tasty colors out there, I use them a lot. That's why in my artwork and in my stories, I use color a lot. My drawings are extremely colorful. And the reason is because colors taste good, so I want to use a lot of them. I want to make the drawing taste good. I want to make the painting taste good. And that's why I use a lot of fantastical elements, because it lets me use a lot of crazy colors that don't go with a normal, typical real life landscape sort of thing. That I can make things pink, I can make things purple, I can make things all sorts of crazy neon colors if I want to. So that's a big part of the reason why my artwork can be so incredibly colorful. And I also use colors a lot in my writing. I use them as details. I love telling y'all all about what color the sky is, what color this room is, what color people's clothes are, what color this food is. And that's a thing that I will be discussing in another video, is the concept in editing called cut the blue curtains, which means cut unnecessary details out of your story. And this is why I also discuss in my video in world building the importance of well-placed details, in that I use my love for using colors in my writing in order to paint a scene for you. So I don't randomly tell you, oh, by the way, those curtains are blue, and then just never mention it ever again, because that's an unimportant detail that the story doesn't need. But when in Love of the Sea, when I have Nefara first introduced, she is introduced in the Princess Parade. And what that is it's this procession. Really? You need to tell everybody things too? You have important things to say. Yeah. Squishy likes to give us input. She is introduced with this procession, as all of the prospective princesses are, in that she is presenting her country and herself, and ultimately what Paradigm would be allied with. And in that, I describe what color the clothes are they're wearing. I describe in great detail the things that they're holding, the instruments that they're using, the treasure that they're carrying, all of that, because it paints a picture. Wow. Really? Yeah. It's very important. Yeah. Because all of that paints a picture of how different the Kingdom of Caraway is from the Kingdom of Paradigm, and honestly how different both of those countries are from the world that we know here today. I utilize those kind of details in order to really set the scene in the story and to really bring to life these fantastical settings. I will never just be like, oh, by the way, this carpet is green. But I'm not going to explain to you why that's important, or even if it is important or isn't important. I'm not going to do that because that's bad writing. But I am going to endlessly tell you all about the beautiful procession that Nefara did to introduce herself to Prince Cormac. And y'all, it is an epic chapter. It really is. I'm really proud of it. It's super beautiful. So that's Synesthesia number 1. Synesthesia number 2. I taste words. Now I know what y'all are thinking. You're like, do you just taste everything? No. I only taste colors and words. That's it. Words that I read on the page, words that I say out loud, I taste them. And on top of it, the word red, R-E-D, tastes the same as me seeing the color red. So there's that bit of crossover with these two forms of my synesthesia, in that the words for colors are the same as the colors themselves. So when I'm writing a story, I use a lot of red because red tastes good. I have actually had people ask me in the past, they're like, why do you use so much red in your stories? What's the symbolism in that? And my answer is, there is no symbolism. Red just tastes good. I'm not even kidding, y'all. It's because red tastes good. That's literally it. But yeah, that's actually a big part of why I choose a lot of the words and a lot of the colors that I use in my books, is because they taste good. And it's also how my style of writing came to be, is just really leaning into my synesthesia and just really going for word choices that just taste better than others. And my Synesthesia poetry series, it's literally titled Synesthesia, and then whatever, Synesthesia darkness, Synesthesia depression, blah, 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 you get the idea. In Synesthesia experimental, I let my synesthesia run wild. That is honestly my rating in its most purest form, is in that poetry collection. That is where there's just a lot of nonsense, literal straight up nonsense, because it's me just writing words and colors that taste good. And there isn't really any other constructive rhyme or reason beyond the way that I wrote that poetry, is except for that it tastes good. And I've told people, there are some poems in that book where I have to restrain myself, where I'm very tempted to like actually lick the page because it just really tastes good to my brain. Now, physically, if I lick that piece of paper, it's not going to taste good. It's not going to taste anything like the things I'm experiencing in my head, because again, this is completely separate from hallucinating. I'm not going to actually taste any of these things physically. It's all in my head. So in my head, I'm having all of these sensations. But if I were to lick a piece of paper with that word on it, it's not going to physically actually taste like what my brain is telling me it tastes like. It's going to taste like paper, and it's going to be gross. So I guess that is the downside to it, that I can't actually taste all those things. It's just, I'm just experiencing it in my head. And for those of y'all are like, well, how do you experience a taste in your head? Think about it this way. You know what a chocolate ice cream cone tastes like. You don't have to be physically sitting here eating a chocolate ice cream cone to know exactly what it tastes like. That's exactly how it is with when I read these words, when I see these colors. It's exactly like that. I am remembering what it tastes like to taste maraschino cherries, what it tastes like to taste blackberry ice cream. That's what that sensation is like. Now, the last one. So, for those of y'all who are not of legal age, please click on down the line. All right, so if you're still watching, I am not responsible for what you're about to hear. This is not safe for work. Third synesthesia is I see colors when I have sex, specifically when I orgasm. And because I'm physically seeing colors when that happens, I'm also tasting the colors at the same time. So when I'm having relations, I am having a full-blown, like, rave experience. It's pretty amazing, I'm not going to lie. So, for example, there was one time when I was having super happy fun time, and I had a particularly impressive orgasm, and I physically saw gold shimmers. Like, it was like gold glitter, basically, like this beautiful like cloud of like gold ethereal glitter. And when I say I saw, like, I really mean I saw, because when I'm experiencing these things that I'm seeing, like, I actually temporarily go blind and I actually can't see anything. It's kind of like I'm blind and this is what I'm seeing, like, in my mind's eye, sort of thing. It's very weird. It's a little bit scary. I've had neurological tests done and I'm not at risk for a stroke, so thank God for that. Because apparently if you go blind while you're having sex, that's a really worrying thing and you could be having a stroke. So if that's happening to you, you should definitely seek medical attention. I saw this beautiful magical ethereal cloud of gold glitter, and at the same time My brain decided this magical gold ethereal cloud of gold glitter tasted like Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. So that was the experience I was having. I was having super happy fun time while in the middle of this ethereal gold glittery cloud while tasting Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. Yeah. You can't make this shit up. So, I know y'all are wondering, how exactly does this tie in to your creative works? I'll tell y'all. For those of y'all that click to the next point, you are past the not safe for work point, but I am going to explain to y'all how that point ties into the first 2 points. Now, because it's essentially creating this entire experience for me where I am seeing and experiencing and tasting all of these things at the same time when that happens, it allows me to just reach a different level of imagination and inspiration that most people are just not capable of. Now, I know what y'all are thinking. You're probably sitting here going, oh, come on, what are you calling yourself, like some sort of magical, like, genius of imagination or something? And the answer is no. Because I don't even know how you would really go about measuring imagination, but just from the discussions that I've had with other creative people, especially other writers, I live on a whole other planet, y'all. That I can 100% factually say. That when I describe how my mind works to other people, they're flabbergasted. And in fact, I've had some friends who have recreationally done hallucinogenic substances, we'll say. And they have straight up told me that the way that my mind works when I am working on my writing is the same way that their minds have worked when they've been under the influence of substances. So my normal, everyday way of my brain functioning is the same as somebody being high. So that right off the bat should tell you something, that it's like we're already starting in a totally different level of thought processing than most people. And then on top of it, you put these completely otherworldly experiences that I have due to my synesthesia, and you just combine that together, and it's just like, truly. And the way that I am able to create is also very unusual. That I learned that very quickly when I was going to school at Columbia College Chicago. That was the first time in my entire life where I was surrounded by other writers who were just as serious about being an author as I was, and for the most part had some sort of talent in writing. There were a lot of different, levels of experience and talent in my writing classes, and that was fine. But even the people that were extremely talented could not compete with the way that I write. And all of my teachers called me prolific because of it. The fact that I was writing without any trouble 600 pages per semester when the base requirement was 60. Yes, it's very impressive. And I'm not saying any of this to have a humble brag, y'all, or to be like, oh, it's so amazing, or anything like that. I'm just trying to explain that we're dealing with very different forces here. That this is a big part of why writing and why creating artwork comes so easily for me. As my friend Brian has said, it's like I just turn on a faucet and it just comes rushing out. Like I don't even have to try. It's just, hello ideas, hello things, la la la. I can just sit here and create for hours and have just no idea that the world is happening around me. 100%. That happens to me all the time. I can sit here for 12 hours and write non-stop. That's a normal occurrence for me. And a big part of that reason is because I can so completely and thoroughly experience what I'm writing. because of the combination of my imagination and my synesthesia coming together to make an actual experience in my head. Because, y'all, when I sit here and write, it is like a movie happening in my head. But it's not even like a movie, it's an experience. Like, it's not just I'm sitting back and there's this movie playing in front of me. I am in it. I am experiencing it in this, like, omnipotent way where it's like I'm pulled back and I am experiencing everything in this world, where it's kind of like, okay, here's this world and I'm going to zoom in on this part and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to zoom in on this part and I'm going to zoom in on this character and I'm going to pull out and I'm going to look at this whole country. And my brain does that effortlessly while I'm writing. The main difficulty I have when I am writing is finding a way, one, to keep up with what's happening in my brain, because it is so much more, what's happening in my brain is so much faster than what I can physically write, especially as I get older, because these are arthritis gloves. These are arthritis compression gloves. I have trouble with physically writing now, and I depend on typing on my keyboard because that's easier for me than holding a pencil and writing. And two, being able to translate what's happening in my head onto the page, finding a way to be able to describe the experience that I'm having into actual words. Those two things are the things that I actually struggle with. Is, oh my god, all these things are flashing through my head, and then how do I make this make any sort of actual sense in written word? And sometimes it's impossible for me to be able to do that. That's why I work in so many different mediums. Sometimes I have to tell that story through my artwork. Sometimes I have to tell that story through poetry. Sometimes I have to tell that story through writing. Sometimes I have to tell that story through performance, because that's just the way that I'm going to be able to express that story in the most sense-making way possible. That's how my 3 different kinds of synesthesia all come together and really have built this cornerstone for how I create all of these works and how I create all of these stories and continue to create all of these stories. And y'all, I honestly am so grateful that I have these gifts, because I am, especially as an adult, so much more aware of how unusual and special they are. And that's why I am even more determined, if that's even possible, to create all of the stories that my mind wants to create, because I've been given those gifts, and I am a firm believer that you should use the gifts that you've been given to the best of your abilities. So that is how my synesthesia works. That's what synesthesia is, and most importantly, that is how my synesthesia has really helped build my writing, y'all. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. It really helps my channel when y'all like and comment and subscribe and all that good stuff, so that I can keep making awesome videos for y'all. So I want to thank y'all so much for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.